weapon disguised as scrap metal sat in the abandoned hangar like a bad joke, rusted hull plating, outdated thruster assemblies, and a navigation system so ancient it still used physical star charts. Kira Vance stared at the Meridian's ghost, the only thing her grandfather had left her, and wondered if the old man had hated her after all. The deck beneath her boots hummed with the energy of 1,000 better ships launching from New Terrace Station. Around her, the other dock workers laughed, sharp, cutting sounds that made her jaw tighten. "That's your inheritance?" Jax called out, his voice carrying across the bay. "My condolences. I'd offer to haul it to the scrapyard, but it'd probably fall apart during the tow." The others joined in. Of course they did. In a colony where everyone measured worth by the quality of their ride, she'd just inherited the punchline. The ghost was 60 years past obsolete, a mining hauler from the first wave era when humanity had clawed its way into the fringe systems with nothing but grit and welding torches. But she needed it. Her contract with the station had expired 3 cycles ago, and without personal transport, she was grounded, stuck. The alternative was begging for crew positions on corporate vessel ships owned by Helix Dynamics, the megacorporation that controlled 70% of the Fringe's resource extraction. The same company that had pushed out independent miners like her grandfather until they either sold their claims or disappeared. Kira climbed aboard, the airlock groaning in protest. Inside, the cockpit smelled like old leather and recycled air. Everything worked barely, but worked nonetheless. Her fingers traced the worn controls, decades of her grandfather's touch having smoothed the edges. She fired up the engine core, and the ghost shuddered to life with a bass rumble that vibrated through her sternum. That's when she found it. Not in the cargo hold. Not in the obvious places. The archive was hidden inside the environmental system's backup processor, a location so mundane that even a custom scan wouldn't flag it. 40 years of evidence in a dead man's closet, compressed and encrypted with military-grade protocols that would have cost more than the ship itself. Her pulse quickened as the first files extracted. Transaction logs, geological survey data, communications transcripts, each one stamped with Helix Dynamics' corporate seal, and each one documenting systematic claim jumping across the entire fringe. Her grandfather hadn't just been pushed out, he'd been stolen from. They all had. Every independent miner who'd vanished over 4 decades, every abandoned claim that Helix had conveniently absorbed, every suspicious accident that the Galactic Council's regulatory division had dismissed as industrial hazard. The ghost wasn't a relic, it was a weapon, inheriting a revolution, not a fortune. Kira's mind raced through the implications. Her grandfather had been gathering this evidence for most of his adult life, documenting Helix's violations of the Outer Territories Development Act, the Indigenous Rights Conventions, and at least a dozen interstellar commerce treaties. The native Kesh population, silicon-based beings who'd inhabited these asteroid fields for millennia before humanity arrived, had been systematically displaced by operations that Helix publicly denied even existed. This wasn't just corporate malfeasance. This was conspiracy on a scale that could trigger sanctions, reparations, and criminal proceedings that would span systems. She transmitted a heavily encrypted message to the Kesh resistance cell, the group her grandfather's logs mentioned repeatedly. The reply came within an hour. Coordinates, a recognition code, and a single line of text. "We've been waiting for you." The Meridian's ghost lifted off from New Terrace Station 3 hours later, its trajectory locked for the Kesh tribal zones. Jax and the others didn't even look up from their card game as she departed. Why would they? Just another piece of junk leaving port. But Kira's hands were steady on the controls, and her grandfather's legacy hummed in the ship's core memory banks. 40 years of receipts ready to burn an empire to ash. The Cosmic Architect presents Part 2. The Kesh tribal zones existed in the maps as navigation hazard, unregulated space, which was Galactic Council speak for "we pretend this doesn't exist." Kira guided the ghost through the asteroid labyrinth, following the coordinates the Resistance had provided. The rocks here were dense with crystalline formations that played hill with standard sensors, natural camouflage that had protected the Kesh for generations. She'd expected a hidden outpost, maybe a hollowed asteroid What she found was a fleet 40 salvaged mining vessels, retrofitted haulers, and cobbled-together patrol craft that represented every independent operator Helix had crushed over the decades. The cache didn't just resist, they preserved. The docking procedure was manual, old school, the kind her grandfather had taught her on simulators when she was 8. Her ship settled into the bay with a metallic groan, and the welcoming party was already waiting. 3 cache elders, their crystalline bodies refracting the hangar lights into cascading rainbows, stood beside a weathered human woman with cybernetic eyes that gleamed like polished chrome. Kira Vance. The woman's voice carried the weight of someone who'd survived things that should have killed her. Your grandfather was a friend. I'm Captain Saren Cross. He died protecting our testimony from reaching Helix assassins. The words hit like a physical blow, but Kira kept her spine straight. Then let's make sure it wasn't for nothing. They spent 6 hours integrating the Ghost's archive with the cache's own documentation. The combined dataset was devastating proof of illegal mining in protected zones, falsified environmental impact reports, bribes to council inspectors, and communication intercepts showing Helix executives explicitly ordering the suppression of indigenous land claims, the kind of evidence that didn't just end careers, it ended corporations. We transmit this to the Galactic Regulatory Commission. Helix goes into receivership within a week, Saren said, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. But we need physical proof from one of their active violation sites, something they can't claim as fabricated. The nearest site was Deep Station Archer, a drilling platform Helix officially listed as decommissioned. The Ghost's data showed it had been operational continuously for 18 months. Extracting rare earth composites from a cache sacred ground. It's in interdiction space. One of the cache elders rumbled, their voice like grinding stone. Automated defense grid. Anything that approaches gets vaporized. Kira felt the grin spread across her face before she could stop it. Good thing I brought a mining hauler. Harpooning a high-tech drone with a tow cable wasn't in any flight manual. But then again, human ingenuity never really cared about what the manuals said. The Ghost approached Deep Station Archer with transponders screaming its identity as obsolete civilian tech, nothing worth the ammunition to destroy. The defense AI agreed, categorizing her as low-priority debris. That contempt bought her 3 minutes. She used 2. The station's perimeter was patrolled by Helix's latest achievement, Wraith-class autonomous interceptors, sleep predators bristling with plasma arrays and heuristic targeting systems that could calculate a kill shot before most pilots even registered the threat. The kind of apex predator technology that cost more than her entire colony's annual GDP. The first Wraith broke from patrol pattern when her scanning suite lit up. Active sensors, deep penetration suite, recording everything. The AI's threat assessment spiked from ignore to eliminate in a microsecond. Kira didn't run. She accelerated straight at the drilling platform. The Wraith's plasma cannons charged, magnetic coils whining. But the Ghost wasn't a combat ship. It was a mining ship, and mining ships had industrial manipulator arms designed to wrangle multi-ton asteroids in zero gravity. She triggered the magnetic harpoon at point-blank range. The cable spooled out with a crack like thunder, the magnetic head clamping onto the Wraith's pristine hull with enough force to crumple armor plating. The drone's AI tried to compensate, thrusters firing in a calculated escape vector, but it had never been designed to fight something that fought like a human. Kira reversed thrust, and the industrial-grade tow cable rated for hauling ore processors went taut. Physics did the rest. The Wraith crumpled, its elegant frame collapsing as she reeled it in like a hooked fish. She slammed it into the station's sensor array, then into the primary drilling assembly, using the drone's own weapons as a battering ram. Sparks erupted across the platform, systems failing in cascading explosions of light and molten metal. Recording complete, the Ghost's computer announced with cheerful indifference. Evidence verified and transmitted. The Galactic Regulatory Commission's response team arrived in system 48 hours later. 3 Council enforcement cruisers that made Helix's security fleet look like toys. The broadcast of verified evidence had already hit every major news net in the sector. Helix Dynamics' stock crashed 17% in the first hour, 34% by market close. They offered her extraction, a clean shuttle off-world, witness protection, a new identity in the core systems where Helix's reach didn't extend. Captain Saren stood beside her in the Ghost's cockpit as Kira declined the offer. "You're staying?" Saren's cybernetic eyes reflected surprise and something deeper. Respect. Kira looked out at the asteroid field, the Kesh tribal zones that her grandfather had fought to protect, the fringe systems that humanity had carved from nothing with stubbornness and welding torches. This wasn't someone else's fight anymore. "Someone's got to make sure the Council actually follows through," she said. "Besides, I just inherited a revolution. Might as well see it through." The Terran spirit wasn't about having the best tech or the biggest guns. It was about the unbreakable bond between what you believed in and what you were willing to bleed for. Her grandfather had understood that. The Kesh understood that. And now, so did she. The Meridian's Ghost powered down in the Resistance fleet's hangar, finally home among the other survivors, the other fighters who'd refused to disappear quietly. Kira's hand rested on the control panel. 40 years of evidence, one impossible victory, and a future that suddenly felt worth building. Not bad for a weapon disguised as scrap metal.